What's up, guys? This is Pat, and before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder to please hit that subscribe button and leave us a rating and review. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn at The Founder Hour. All right, here we go.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Posh.
I'm Pat.
And we're here with Justin Baldoni. He's an actor, director, producer, entrepreneur, and changemaker. And I'm a personal fan of yours as well by watching Jane the Virgin. I know a lot of people are like,
You watched Jane the Virgin?
Yeah. I had to just admit that, I guess.
You played it so cool.
Yeah, totally. I had to get my fiance to watch Jane the Virgin. So, I mean, like, look at those dynamics.
That's switch.
Yeah, exactly. So excited to be here, excited to kind of learn more about you and what you've done and what you're doing. So thanks for being on with us.
Thanks for having me. What about you? Not so much a Jane the Virgin fan?
I have never seen Jane the Virgin. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's what I was expecting. I normally walk into conversations with men and it's like, wait, what was the show you were on?
I've heard of it.
And I'm generally like,
My girlfriend watches it, though.
don't worry about it, or your girlfriend might watch it.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a great show. I think it's something that.
Wait, how did you fall into that show? Was it like a random Netflix
I have just like Netflix. I'm like, I don't really like anything, and so I was like, Virgin, sounds interesting.
Virgin.
Yeah,
that was the word.
Just saw Virgin. I mean, Richard Branson obviously had something going when he named his company Virgin. So that was interesting. So I just watched it. I like drama. I mean, I come from an Armenian background. There's always drama. And so that's just how I got into it. And here we are today. It's been like, 4 or 5 seasons?
It was on for 5 years, 5 seasons.
Yeah.
And then we wrapped the show almost a year ago in April.
Yeah.
So
it's a great show.
I feel like 5 seasons is like a nice amount of time because I've heard like actors and actresses that are on the show for like 10 years, 12 years, like Game of Thrones. That's like who they are, and it's kind of a weird identity crisis once they're out. Did you ever like experience that at all?
It's interesting. I talk about this sometimes, this idea of the thing that you fight for, the thing that you dream about, the thing that you just want so badly, when it finally comes, this strange thing happens where you, after a period of time, start to take it for granted.
Yeah.
And I think it's human nature. And I remember after 2 years of the show, a lot of us on the show were starting to get a little antsy because we're just so used to, I think as entrepreneurs, as actors, as performers, as creatives, there's this need for like constant stimulation and change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think after a couple of years, I noticed, I was like, why am I getting antsy? I mean, this is like, it took me 10 years to get a show like this. This is like my dream. I get to work in LA. My family's here. I'm having a kid. I'm financially stable. It's helping me pursue. And then you start to realize like, oh, this is just human nature, right? It's this thing where you finally achieve your dream. And then it's like, okay, what's next?
Right.
Versus just like taking stock in what you have and being grateful and realizing that like, wait, I get to do this. And because one of the Arabic words for human, insan, is they who forget. Mm-hmm. So going way back, all the way back to one of the earliest languages, right? They who forget. And it's an interesting thing to think about. Like as human beings, we just naturally forget everything.
Yeah.
The purpose of that was we forget our creator, right? You forget your reason why maybe, you guys have been doing this, you said, for 2 years when we were before we were starting. It's like, I'm sure there's a time that will happen soon where you're like, you want something bigger or you want to do more or you got to forget it's a natural thing. You start a company. This is, you have a lot of founders on the show, right? It's about the Founder Hour. Founders all the time, we get caught up in like this idea of wanting to build something and then you build it and then you kind of forget the why, and then you kind of lose track, and that's why a lot of
on the flip side, though, I think
down.
it's interesting because I always think these super mega successful founders, entrepreneurs that have billion-dollar companies, it's like they probably didn't even imagine that, and it was like a series of steps and little things that ended up that way. So it's kind of like that whole maximizer versus satisfizer thing, where you're always just trying to get more and more. But definitely on the flip side, it's like you want to also leave time for reflection and making sure that you see how you got there. And
it's just being mindful and present, I think, and that was what always helped me on coming back to your initial question. That's what helped me on the show not get the blues and just be over it. because it's very easy to become complacent. And I think just taking stock, saying, wait a second, I'm on a TV show set, right? Like I'm walking in, I'm being greeted by the PAs. There's 200 people on set. There's cameras, there's lights. I need to say my lines. Holy shit, I'm an actor.
Yeah.
Like
it's real.
It's real. And in what world was this even a possibility when I was growing up, right? In what world was this even, there was even a chance that this would happen? And I never thought it would be possible. So those moments where I could kind of go back in time and realize like, holy crap, I'm literally living my own dream and millions of other people's dreams. That's what allowed me to kind of stay in the moment. But 10 seasons, it's really hard, man, because you just, you're playing the same character. You naturally, as a human being, want to try new things or try to play other characters. In Hollywood, you kind of get boxed into these roles. So after 5, 6, 7 years, people see you as that person wherever you go.
Right. So now you're like Rafael to everyone.
Hopefully, I got out just in time.
To me, you're Justin now.
But at the same time, instead of being annoyed, I can also go like, wow, what a blessing.
Right.
Like I built a character that people love so much.
And in those 5 years, did you ever do anything else in the acting realm? Like, because I always wonder, like these actors sometimes these big actors that have like two movies coming up simultaneously and they're working on it. Have you ever done that? And like, was that a challenge?
Yeah. Well, so I guess for me. No, but I did everything else in terms of starting a company and building and directing and producing movies and other TV shows. Like that's what I was doing. I wasn't trying to act in between the show. In fact, I didn't even have an agent the entire time I was on the show.
Really?
So
you're booking you're doing all your bookings, everything yourself?
It's not. It's a little different than that. I had a manager, but so much of my business is generated outside of the acting world, so it's the production, the all of the other things that have to do with building and creating a sustainable company, which is what I was really focused on. So my intention of Jane the Virgin was to use the show to build everything else
as a platform,
to build out my ecosystem. So it was a massive gift from God for me that the show happened, and it just so happened to be a show that people in our industry watched, which gave me a certain amount of like clout,
like cachet,
right? Because if I was on just like One Life to Live or that's on every day for 25 years.
My grandma watches that every single day.
And if your grandma could give me a job, then that would have been like the perfect show for me. But luckily, it was like the right mix. It was lightning in a bottle at the right time, and I was able to kind of transform and use the show to build what I had been building pre the show.
Right.
Kind of to talk about the backstory here, because I'm curious, like how it all sort of came about. Were you someone as a kid that like always wanted to be an actor? Like you were like dead set focused on this, or what happened?
No, I was always. So my dad. So going way back, my dad started the product placement industry in the early '80s. So he was one of the founding fathers of the integrated marketing industry. After Spielberg did E.T. With the Reese's Pieces, and sales shot up like 1,000%. He did Gremlins with Spielberg afterwards, and then from there on started a product placement marketing firm, essentially, where he was the middleman between the movie studios and the brands. Because he went like, oh, well, there's a big opportunity here. And my dad was always 10, 15 years ahead of the industry.
But he was in the film industry, or was he like an advertising?
He was in the film industry.
Okay.
But he's a natural-born entrepreneur and a bit of a futurist and a visionary. And he's always been a dreamer. And so I grew up watching my dad always kind of predicting trends and being a little too far ahead, almost so much so that it hurt him. I remember back in the early 90s, he told me that there wouldn't be commercials one day. He's like, commercials will be built into the shows that you watch. Right. And then like this was like pre-AOL dial-up. And he talked about interactive television was the word he used for it, where you would be able to interact with your TV. Like we have Netflix now, like we have all of these things. So much so that he started a company called AsCNN.com in the late 90s with spelling, where it was the first time you could go and buy anything you saw on 90210 or Melrose Place. You could buy like this microphone or this coffee cup or this table. And it was this huge, big idea, and it was going to blow up. And then the dot-coms crashed because there was no Wi-Fi. Right. Like, people didn't have access to it. We forget those days.
Yeah.
So I grew up at this strange intersection, and my mom is an artist. like a physical artist and a designer. So I had this like business creative, brain dad and this artistic mom, and I kind of grew up in this intersection of art and commerce in this strange way. And I never thought I could be an actor because I honestly didn't have the confidence. I was a bit of an ugly duckling. And I know it's like,
what do you mean by that? Like,
people laugh when I say that, but like,
were you just not comfortable with the way you looked, or was it?
The way that I describe it is like, I never had the girl like me. I was always the friend. So I was always the friend in the romantic comedy. Right?
That
so
love triangle, yeah.
Like there was no love triangle in my world. It was a very one-way love triangle. It was I like you,
just linear.
You like him.
That guy,
Sure, you can talk to me all about your feelings for him, and I'll just like suck it up for 2 hours every night and then like cry. So my high school, my middle school and high school was very much like me trying to figure out who I was, just knowing like that I wasn't that guy. Yeah. Like I remember an experience where my dad took me to this big, huge convention of all of these TV shows in New Orleans for my 16th birthday, and I brought a friend with me. And like these modeling scouts kept going up to my friend. Like they would like say hi, and then they'd look at him and they'd say like, "Hey, have you thought about modeling and stuff?" And there was this part of me deep down that I was like, "Oh, that'd be so nice to feel that attractive." But that was never me until I got older and moved to Hollywood. And the first time I ever had a manager, he sent me on an audition, and the description was literally like super hot, blah blah blah, and I remember emailing him back and saying, I don't know if this role is right for me.
Yeah.
And he's like, why? And I'm like, did you read the description? He's like, what are you talking about? So I've been dealing with my own versions of like the self-confidence of that. So the answer was no, I never thought I could be an actor. I always, though, loved creating. So I used to make movies instead of book reports in high school. And like my teachers would let me do that kind of stuff. I remember doing an alternate ending of The Great Gatsby when I was 17.
That's awesome that your teachers let you do that, because I feel like a lot of teachers maybe don't. And
I had one teacher that did.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for her. She was awesome. Yeah. She was our English teacher.
So Justin, during this time where you don't really, think you're going to be an actor, I mean, what was your goal? Like in high school, did you have any idea of what you wanted to be?
I was in radio. So when I was 16, I was the youngest DJ in Clear Channel history, I believe.
By the way, what city are you guys living in at this time?
When I was 10, we lived in Santa Monica right here where we're recording till I was 10. And then when I was 10, we moved to Oregon after the earthquake.
Right. 94.
The Martin Luther King Day earthquake in 94. Yep. My mom was like, we are getting the hell out of here. She was convinced California was going to fall into the ocean.
Yeah.
What's crazy is that I lived in Northridge at the time, and I don't know why.
Same.
I don't know why my parents didn't decide to leave.
My parents definitely decided to leave.
We actually moved like to the next city over.
I think it was a combination of the riots, and then there was fires, and then
there was a
the
lot going on,
earthquake, and there was just a crazy 3 years in LA. And my mom was like, "We wanna raise you in a different place." So my sister and I and my parents moved up there, and so I was really disconnected from the industry. My dad would fly down to LA every week, and so my connection with it was watching television and movies. So that was my escape. Like I loved movies, I loved TV, and I was absorbed into that. And especially as someone that was trying to figure out who I was and didn't have a lot of friends and didn't have a lot of girlfriends, like that was my escape. So that's where my creative outlet kind of happened. But when I was 16, I fell into being a DJ. Someone asked me this question, like, what do you want to do? And we had these things called senior projects. Mm-hmm. And I did my project on the only thing that I could find that was comparable to the entertainment industry in my little town, which was radio, because I also loved music. And so at the time, like none of us we had Walkmans and CD players and things, but we didn't have Spotify and all these things. Yeah. So we listened to the radio back then. And so I went and I interviewed the programming director, and he offered me a job doing overnights. So when I was 16, I was working midnight to 6 in the morning on Fridays and Saturday nights. And
so
then
definitely no time for girls.
Well, that was also an excuse. Like it was.
I'm busy.
It was an excuse in the sense that there was no girls anyways. So it's like
perfect.
And then that turned into a regular job. So I was doing it during the daytime. I was recording myself while I was on. So I was going to school, and I would technically be on the radio at the same time because it was pre-recorded. Mm-hmm. When Kiss came in, I moved over to Kiss. Clear Channel came in and bought a
Rick
station
D's.
there.
What was your DJ name?
Just in case.
Just in case. That's good.
Yeah.
I have
Because
some Instagram friends with like an underscore just in case was their username.
it was just in case or just in time. And I remember I remember it was you have those jingles. It was just in case, the perfect face for radio. Hence like what I meant, but like you know.
Oh my God.
So I didn't know what I was going to be. I just knew I knew what I wanted to do was be of service in some capacity with whatever talents or gifts that I had. So whether that was being on the radio or whether that was like, I didn't know. And I found my way to LA and there's
So what happened? How did the acting thing come about? How did you?
The acting thing came about. I tore my hamstring my senior year of high school. I was a soccer and a track athlete. And I was going to go to college for either one. And I tore my hamstring senior year, fell into a pretty big depression. I was one of these kids where I was an athlete. So that was my high school. It was not academics. I always was banking on the fact that I'd get a scholarship somewhere. And only 2 schools offered me anything. And Long Beach State basically offered me a partial scholarship. They covered like all my books and something else. Like it was, it was a couple $1,000s. And I really wanted to get out of Oregon. I wanted to come back to LA. And I chose Long Beach State and fell in love, got my heart broken, got cheated on, ended up moving out of Long Beach to transfer to Santa Monica College. And I moved into, my dad had kept this tiny little office, which was a studio apartment on Wilshire. And I moved into his office. There was only a couch and a desk. And I slept on that when I transferred to Santa Monica College. And in that apartment building, a man asked me if I wanted to be an actor. And
He just came up to you and he's like, "Hey, you want to be an actor?"
Yeah.
Like one of those guys in the mall or something? Like,
yeah. And there's like, in hindsight, it was a bit predatory.
Yeah.
There was a strange relationship, and I realized that a little bit later.
what was like his?
He was a manager. He was a manager. Yeah. And it just something about But again, I'm a 20-year-old kid, and I don't know anything about the business, and someone thinks that like I'm good looking enough or whatever to be an actor, and it was a big deal. And that's for another time, that story. But essentially, a couple months later, I got my first job. I took my first acting class, and I got my first job, and that began this strange, 10-year overnight success story of what happened on Jane the Virgin.
Justin, I'm curious, and I know that you're a very thoughtful person and probably have always been that way. You've always probably thought about these deep topics and have had conversations with yourself and others about life in general and other things. And one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is, pursuing your passion versus finding your passion, right? We hear all the time people say, pursue your passion. And my response always is, I don't even know what my passion is, right?
Passion's a dangerous word.
Right. I agree. Did you ever think like that, or did you ever know what drove you, what motivated you, what your why was? And if you did, when did that come up?
Yeah, but it's probably a little bit different than some of the other people you've had on the podcast. My why wasn't motivated by personal gain. So the most important part of my story is, for me, my faith. I was raised in the Bahá'í Faith. If you don't know what the Bahá'í Faith is, it's the most recent of the world religions. There are 6.5 million Baha'is around the world. Essentially, we believe in the unity of all the religions. We are all different chapters in one book. There's one God. It's not a guy in the sky with a beard. It's an unknowable essence. We're finite beings, therefore we don't have the ability to comprehend something that could create us or the universe. And the basic principle is that we're all one, that all the religions are all one, and the central theme of all of it is love. And we're asked in the Baha'i Faith to engage in an occupation or a trade and let that trade be a form of service to humanity. So for me, I always knew I wanted to be of service with whatever it was. I can even think back. It's funny, we brought up radio. I was on the radio, it was like 1 a.m. I was 16 when Aaliyah, remember the singer Aaliyah, was killed in a plane crash. And I remember pausing the music and saying a prayer live on the radio to the 20,000 people that were listening. And having a feeling in that moment that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? Not per se like radio, but injecting spirituality, a higher consciousness of sorts into entertainment. So for me, my why has always been to serve God. Now, that's not to say along the way that's been blurred and my ego and the why gets lost because I forget, as we said earlier, and then it's my job to rediscover my why. Yeah. And the whys will change. I also believe in the three whys. I don't believe in the one. I think the one why is still selfish. Because if you go a level deeper and you ask the second why of the why, and then you go a third and say, what's the why of that why? Then you get to the true core of why you really are doing what you're doing.
And what is that for you?
That's for me to serve God.
Right.
The first why is like, I want to be an actor to make a difference.
Right.
Why do I want to make a difference? Like, and there could be a ton of reasons why. I could, in my search for my whys, I could be realizing that I'm trying to heal the wounds of my childhood.
Right.
Or I'm trying to become popular at a time because I didn't have any friends.
Right.
Or I'm trying to heal. Like there's a wound underneath all of that, I believe.
Yeah.
But if you go deeper, there's no wound. So for me, it's to be of service because I believe that this life is a workshop and it's a preparation for the next.
Right.
It's a mirage in some ways, as we're told. So I just have always known that that's why I want, which is one of the reasons why if I look at everything that I touch, it all is a part of that same ecosystem, and I never kind of diverge off that path. And it's been a huge help for me. It's been a guiding force.
Yeah. So this guy approaches you and you sort of fall into this acting thing. Was there like a time where the wheels are starting to turn and you're starting to get gigs, but you were maybe like clashing with the industry at all, or like?
I've always clashed with the industry. I've always felt like I didn't belong.
Like a black sheep.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think when you talk about spirituality and faith in our business, it's oftentimes seen with cynicism and it falls on deaf ears, and you're looked at in a funny way. I mean, especially 15 years ago when I started. I'm really proud of my naivety, by the way, back when I was a kid.
Also, back then, because social media wasn't as big, not everyone had a voice as big as they have today. So you were sort of represented by what you were, like what shows or TV, movies you were on, or like what network you worked for and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, but even then, like I never even got to that place. I got one of my first gigs was this show called Everwood when I was 21, and it was a great show. I came on the fourth season. The show got canceled, and I couldn't get a job after that for a few years. But back then, it was really just you were only as good as your managers or agents, really. And I was always somebody that nobody really got. I mean, I had the same problem in the industry. Like, is he ethnic? Is he white? Is he like Persian? Is he like, nobody knew what I was. Nobody knew if I was 30 or if I was 20.
Isn't that a good thing though in acting?
Not really.
Situation.
Not really. Like I was generally cast as like bad guys or rapists or like, just weird.
Terrorist number 6.
I never got to play a terrorist.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I've auditioned for many terrorists, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I didn't steal.
You're not bad enough to be a terrorist.
My friends, like my Middle Eastern friends, it's like a blessing and a curse because playing these roles are also the things that have kept them alive for so long. But at the same time, there's always a frustration that it's like all I play is that role.
Yeah.
So at the very least, I didn't steal that away from them.
Good.
But yeah, man, I've always been in conflict to a certain extent, but that's also a motivating factor of like what we do is like, can we change the industry? Can we disrupt in a positive way the way things are made or the way things are done, Like,
and is that something that you see more now? Like, is it changing towards that? Or is it still,
it is. It absolutely is. It's changing in a lot of ways. I know for me, there was no handouts. Like nobody was like knocking down my door saying, do you want to make a movie or do you want to make this show? It was always us beating on doors saying like, hey, can you please believe in this? Or this is why the world needs this. And very similar to my dad, like being a little ahead of my time, like, and ahead of his time, I was trying to sell entertainment that was positive, that said something, you know, that the network's called Earnest, you know, 8 years ago, when all people wanted was like darker and edgier and this. And now we're finally starting to see that come back around. But it's you know, it's a bystander of where we are in like society. I believe we're in this rapid state of disintegration and reintegration. You're seeing like the old world fall apart, while at the same time the new world be built back up. You know, and that new world is being built back up, hopefully with more spiritual ideals. You know,
Justin, we've sat down with like hundreds of people at this point, and entrepreneurs, creators, founders, etc., and you know, including yourself now. And all of these people have dealt with challenges and struggles and problems in their life, and both in personal and professional, in their professional lives. How do you see yourself dealing with, you know, the struggles that have come up in your professional and personal career, and how do you approach that?
Rumi said, "The wound is where the light enters you." Leonard Cohen in this song called Anthem says, "The crack is where the light gets in." Baha'u'llah in the Bahá'í Faith says, "My calamity is my providence. Outwardly it is fire and vengeance, but inwardly it is light and mercy." He says, "With fire we test the gold, and with gold we test our servants." So the idea of hardships and calamity and tests and trials, this is a ever-present theme in the Bahá'í Faith and in my life, and something that we talk about constantly. And for me, it comes down to how you look at trials. Baha'u'llah always says to see the end in the beginning. And so obviously there's like this initial reaction that happens when something bad happens, where it's very easy to become a victim or to react emotionally or to become upset. And I'm Italian. So, you know, the first decade was me trying to figure out, like in the business, me trying to figure out the balance of like, well, how do I manage people, or how do I run a company, or how do I, you know, this person did something unjust, and my first instinct is to like, it's fight or flight. There's also that masculine part of me that wants to like, you know, fix things and punish, and like, no, that's not okay, and like fire, and you know, all the very traditional ways in which you see businesses run, and many that have become billionaires or run their businesses that way. But personally, when it comes down to hardships and trials, I've been practicing immediately searching for the why, or what could possibly be the benefit to this. And it's been such a help.
The benefit of your
reaction? The benefit to the actual test or the trial or the hardship, right? But it's really hard to do that.
For sure.
Unless you're constantly undergoing hardships.
It's a practice, though. I mean, you have to practice that.
It's a practice.
And every situation is different, so there is no blueprint.
And every situation is different. And the whole point of this, like, I always said in our office, like, you don't learn how to surf in calm water. Right? You know, you don't become a great captain by just going out and traversing like calm seas. Like, you need to be tested, right? Pilots need to be tested. We all need to be tested. When we go to the gym, because we want our muscles to grow. So every single machine in that gym is built to make a very simple range of motion more challenging in some way. It's a hardship that we put on our body. It's a test. It's a trial that we're putting our bodies through. But for some reason, like, we don't think about that when we're experiencing hardships in life. Like, we go and pay $120 to Equinox to go have a nice experience at the gym.
Can you tell me which Equinox that is? Because I pay way more.
I don't go
way more. Yeah,
I actually don't go. I build a gym in my house.
Perfect.
That's the way to do it.
Mostly for efficiency, but we pay money to go to these gyms, and we do it like willingly. But when hardships happen to us in our lives, we don't always have that same response. So we've been, and I say we in the sense like my wife and I talk about this a lot. It's also very present in our faith. Is the outlook on hardships and trials and tests, like when bad things happen, or when you get disappointed, or when an outcome isn't what it should be, or when someone does something unjust, it's like, well, where's the lesson for me? And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from a dear friend of mine who's dying of cancer right now, and I was struggling in my relationship with my wife when we were dating, and I was like, I don't know what to do, like, should I call her? Should I not call her? Like she's not responding to me. This was early on in our dating life. And he said, and he was a meditation martial arts master. And he said, whenever you feel that thing in your gut come up because of a hardship or a test, and whenever you feel anger or you feel passion about something, do the opposite. Do not go into that response that you want to go into, that like, oh, I want to text her back, or I want to fire that person, or I want to yell at that person. Take a breath and do the opposite, because it's not coming from a pure place. And that was the greatest advice I ever got.
Love that.
And I think the best thing that we can do as entrepreneurs, as people in general, I don't know if you're both married, but if eventually in a marriage,
it's coming up,
is you're never going to get to that point where you can just handle every situation and be perfect.
Yeah.
Then you don't need to be alive. You've succeeded.
Yeah.
You've quieted your ego.
Yeah.
Nothing bothers you anymore. Congratulations.
Yeah,
if you are somebody that tells me that you can go through your entire life and not respond with anger or emotion or like
you're
act
a
out of
robot.
line, then I don't believe you. You're a robot. You're not a human being anymore. And I don't think any of us will ever get there. But what we can do is come back really fast and apologize. And it makes me think, this morning, I was driving here. I had a meeting this morning, and I woke up a little bit off today. I'm tired. I was up really late last night. And I pulled out of my house, and there's a stop sign. Like, I make a right, and there's a stop sign right there.
Yeah.
There's never anybody there. So I pull out, and I'm setting up Waze on my phone just because there's traffic, and I'm already late. And I'm just kind of rolling through the stop sign. And as I roll through the stop sign, I see out of the corner of my eye this woman saying, "What are you doing?" Like yelling at me. And then I just kind of kept rolling, and I was like, what the heck just happened? And I looked back in my rearview mirror, and she's flipping me off.
Oh, good.
Because I was looking at my Waze and rolled through the stop sign and almost hit her dog because she had 2 dogs. And I stopped, and I went, okay, I have 2 choices here. One is I'm late, and I could just keep going, which is the normal thing that Angelino and Angelinos do.
Yeah, this happens on a daily basis.
Or I could turn around and apologize and not have her day start off in a really shitty way. Because I've never had anyone do that to me. So I made a choice. I turned around. I drove around. I caught up with her. I pulled up. I rolled my window down, and she saw me, and you could see her get really angry. And I said, "I'm so sorry. I am so embarrassed. I was looking at my phone. I didn't see you. Please forgive me." And she suddenly, like, her shoulders dropped. She had a smile on her face, and she had no idea what to do because no one had ever probably done that.
Yeah.
And she goes, it's okay. Thank you for apologizing. And I was like, "I'm so sorry." And I just went off, and she went off, and I could see her just like relax. And then, her day was better. My day was better because I didn't hold some of that guilt. That's the thing that I think I've learned the most in my journey as an entrepreneur and my journey as a filmmaker, telling the stories. We haven't even talked about it of, all these people who are dying of terminal illnesses and living amazing lives. And our show, My Last Days, this idea of like coming back faster. Because we're all going to fuck up. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to like accidentally cut somebody off or accidentally hit, this woman and her dogs because you're looking at your phone
Hopefully
on
not,
Waze. Hopefully not. But like, we'll all do something that is some minor or bigger offense to somebody, including our spouses or whatever. But how fast can you come back after that? So in terms of hardships and trials, that's how I look at it. It's like,
Also,
I'm not always going to
if
fail.
you're on the other side too, like if you're the one being affected, like how quickly can you
have compassion?
Exactly. And forgive, and because life is so short, and why get caught up in all these little things sometimes.
And that's a fun game that I think about is if somebody ever gets pissed at you when you're driving or like cuts you off or is going too fast.
Usually your spouse.
Or my spouse. But you go like, I wonder what they're going through.
Yeah.
Or like I create like a false this like dream where I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if they just found out somebody in their family got cancer.
I've done that so many times.
If they're rushing. And it's like suddenly it's like, oh, I'm not mad at them.
Yeah.
Like I can't let that ruin my day.
Yeah.
And you can apply that same thinking to your business, to your life, to your relationships, to anything. There's a quote in the Baha'i writings, neither take nor give offense. And like it'll never happen.
Yeah.
But the idea is like, can we go throughout our lives and make an effort to not take or give offense?
Justin, I remember a couple of years ago I was listening to something that you had done, and you were discussing, and you kind of talked about how when you talk things out, it almost makes you feel better, right? And you had talked about this for the topic of toxic masculinity that you really have been advocating on, and I personally really love. And it was about some situation that you were going to, and you had met up with your friends, and you took them somewhere, and you had this like struggle. And after 3 days, you were finally courageous enough to actually tell them what the problem was, and you saw that they shared the same sort of issues that you had, right? Talk to us a little bit about how this even came to be, where this idea in your mind of like the toxic masculinity, and that I should try to make a difference, be that change maker that we talked about.
So I want to stop you on the toxic masculinity part,
Okay.
because I'm actually not fighting toxic masculinity.
Okay.
And it's interesting to see how weaponized that word has become politically. And I kind of jumped out publicly and was talking about, this all started because I was talking about how much I love my wife and daughter as they were being born. Like this whole journey that I've been on with masculinity was because I was writing these long captions on my Instagram, which nobody was following me. So I was just using it as a personal journey or a personal diary. I was talking about the love I had for my daughter and my hopes and dreams for her to break the glass ceiling. Because when you have a daughter, unfortunately, sometimes you start to realize like how the world is set up, not in their
Against
favor,
them,
right? And how it's very much been in, especially as a straight white male, my favor. Not things that I was always thinking about. I did always recognize that there was an issue, but I didn't always have the language to describe it. But in this process, I've realized that toxic masculinity is being used in a weaponizing way to make men feel a certain way. And I'm not against men. I'm a man. I love being a man.
Yeah.
Like I have a huge group of male friends. Like I'm a dude in every sense of the word, whether it's like through sports or the gym or like, whatever. I've been called alpha many times. Although after my TED Talk, a lot of guys reached out to me and DM'd me and tagged me in beta. And I'm like, can we talk about that? I'm like, actually, let's talk about that, which technically is not something that's beta.
Because they thought that you were going against normality. But
they didn't watch the whole talk.
Right, exactly.
The problem was that like that Facebook video of my talk got like 50 million views, and it was only a 3-minute segment, and I said the word toxic in it.
But it was like actually like a 20-minute
But it's an 18-minute talk, and it talks about my journey of masculinity, what I learned from my father. And the whole point of the talk, the thesis, if you will, is that as men, we need to learn to embrace all parts of us, including the parts of us that society recognizes as feminine, right? All parts of us. Just like women don't need to only have the feminine parts of them, they can have the masculine parts of them. And that was the whole idea of like, to be complete human beings as men, we need both sides. But toxic has become a trigger. And it makes men feel attacked, and I can understand why. So the last few years I've been really thinking about my language, and because my work is not with women, my work is with other men. Like that's what, like when me and my guys get together, that's where the work is.
Right.
So I just am very mindful in the words that I use, because unfortunately they've been used against us in so many ways. But in terms of the journey, man, it's just been me trying to figure out myself. I don't have I'm not trying to like be woke or make snap my finger, be an influencer and preach, and preach. I don't have anything to offer anybody except my own experiences as a man and as a human, and what it was like for me growing up, and maybe some of the things that because of the way we are cultured as young boys, and because of the images that are projected onto us, and because of what we're taught and what's been passed down to us, have kind of worked against us and hurt us in a lot of ways. And so I'm offering my journey of exploration to see if some of those things can be rectified or adjusted or changed through introspection and through maybe like thinking about things a little bit differently. Yeah. But that's it. It's like,
Yeah, and on that topic, I think it's interesting to think about, and I would encourage people to usually, like I'm always weary of this too, and trying to look out for myself when I'm in a situation where I'm part of a larger system, and you quickly get accustomed to that system, and you're no longer an individual. You're part of a system, and a lot of your beliefs and the way you look at things are shaped by that system. So it could be where, you know, the environment you grew up in, it could be your society, it could be who you follow on Instagram, or what types of music or TV you consume, that kind of stuff. So it's something that it requires a lot of mindfulness and making sure that you're looking out for yourself and not falling into that trap. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest thing for me is that I just asked myself hard questions.
Like what?
Why do I do that? Why do I behave this way? Why do I react that way? I've always been somebody that feels guilty immediately after doing something that I intuitively feel could have hurt somebody, right? So if I lose my temper and I storm off or something, I will immediately feel guilty about it. The difference is I now ask myself why. Like, why did I react that way? Or like, what was that part of me that made me feel like I had to rip that person's head off? Why am I interrupting my wife? I talk about that in the TED Talk. Mm-hmm. Like, what is it about me that for some reason subconsciously values her less and her opinions less than my own? Because otherwise, why would I be not listening to hear everything she says? That means that I already think that I'm right, assuming that she then is wrong. Where does that come from? Did I experience that? Did my father do that? Like, you know, the thing, why do I feel like I have to always have my shit together? Why am I so afraid to show vulnerability in my close male friendships? Why am I afraid to show weakness? You know, what are like these things that all of us to a certain extent feel? We all have our own things. You know, if I was drinking a lot, like, why am I? Like, what is this part of me that makes me feel like I need to go numb myself? Why can't I cry in front of my male friends? Why is it so hard to look another guy in the eye? All of these things were things that I think about, but I never really asked myself the questions of the why. Like, why? And when you start to ask why, the answers become pretty clear. It's like, it's socialization, and it's our job now at this point. Then once we ask those questions of why, we have to figure it out. You got to go deep, and then that's where the work starts. And it's like, oh, well, if for some reason I am putting on a face and always making it look like I have my shit together, and I realize that that's what my dad did, and I learn through talking to him that's what his dad did, then, oh wait, I can let that go because that's not me. That's a script that was given to me by my dad that said,
and you could change that cycle.
And you can change the cycle. You can end it. You can stop it, right? And you can do that with like literally everything.
Right.
And that's been kind of the journey that I've been on. That's my masculinity journey. That's what I do the show Man Enough.
Do you think that when you started opening up to your male friends that it created this domino effect?
Yeah.
And they also felt like, okay, now it is okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
It is okay to have these conversations. I feel
Sorry, that was the other part of your question. I never.
No, it's okay. I mean, like Pat and I always have these discussions because I mean we're best friends. We can look each other eye to eye and tell each other about our emotions, our struggles, all that stuff. But we feel as though sometimes that the same thing that you feel is that other people think that it's not, men don't feel like it is okay to be okay. Like they do need to have their shit figured out. They do need to provide. They do need to make money. All that kind of stuff. And all those things are great. But you know, what is it that that we can do collectively as men to then inspire other men to also open up and be transparent, if not with others but themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I'm grateful you asked. As men, I think we like human beings, right? It's monkey see, monkey do. Like as humans, we form our personalities, our likes, our dislikes as a product of our environment and by the things that we see that we either like or that we don't like, right? And men especially are heavily influenced by other men. So it is this double-edged sword in so many ways. For a long time, men have had to be a certain way to survive. Women culturally, at least here, are taught that as women, they should gather in groups and talk about things. Like it's a good thing. It's encouraged, right? From a very early age, tea parties and things. Men, like when we're boys, we're not encouraged to sit and drink tea and like talk and tell stories. We're encouraged to go play or roughhouse or wrestle or build something or go outside and get dirty. And you start to see early on in the socialization of both women and men that women are very encouraged to form these groups and these factions to talk about things, and men are not. So it's partly socialization, I believe. And a big part of what I've learned is by taking that risk, which it's interesting. Like I'm doing a lot of cold plunging and ice bath work right now because I'm afraid of it. And I really like to dive into things that I'm afraid of.
So you got to go on the Kevin Hart show? That's in your future.
Yeah, in the future. Although I don't think they don't get all the way in, and you don't want to be in for that long anyways.
Yeah.
But just the idea of getting into an ice bath for me is terrifying. And I just have this thing with cold water, and so I've been forcing myself to do it. And that right before you do it, right, your body responds in a very, very predictable way. Your heart rate increases. You start to sweat. You start to breathe differently. Like your breathing becomes a little bit labored. Some anxiety sets in. And the identical thing happens before I share something with another man or another person that's private or that could expose me or could make me feel weak. And it's an interesting physiological effect. And being able to push through that and get on the other side of it, bliss is waiting. Because when you get out of that cold plunge, you feel euphoric. After you've shared the load of your feelings with another man or friend or therapist, you feel like a weight's been taken off your shoulder in your chest, and you can breathe a little bit easier and your heart rate slows down. That's not something that we've ever been taught, right? We're taught to go to the gym. We're taught to do these things. We're taught to perform to a certain extent our masculinity. But we've left out the most human part of it, which is the sharing. Because the other part of masculinity that nobody talks about is how lonely it can feel, right? And there's parts of being a woman that are identical. I mean, my wife described the loneliness of motherhood in a way that I've never been able to comprehend, even as a man. It's far lonelier than what I've experienced as a man. This feeling of loneliness of being a mother and not being celebrated and appreciated for all the hard work that you're doing and raising these children, while I, on the other hand, am raising and building a company and getting all the awards and celebration. She's not getting any of that at home. But as a man, like being able to share, in the sharing, we give other men permission. And that's the magic. Like that was the magic. That's why I chose to do the TED Talk. The whole point was like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to share some parts of myself that are ugly. And if I'm right, it will give other men permission to do the same. And I'm willing to have arrows and darts thrown at me and all the words they use, cucks and all these things. I'd never even heard of half of these words that men say, to make other men look bad and make themselves feel better. But like that process was amazing. So when I shared, if I share with my male friends that I'm struggling with something and I feel that physiological response kick in, when I let it go, I'm like, oh, I feel free. Because then they're like, yeah, dude, I feel that. Or I'm struggling with that. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly it's funny, we become like the women in our lives for hours, because once a man starts to open up about his feelings, there is just so much in there of shit that we have been repressing and holding down that had never come out. And suddenly it's like, oh, not only are we good at talking about our feelings, we have a ton to talk about, but we never allow ourselves the permission. We don't uncork the bottle and allow it to come out. So we're just
like in 1988, like Cabernet Sauvignon.
But when it comes out, man, we're amazing. And that needs to happen more, because in the process of sharing, true connection actually happens. And I believe that's where real male friendships are built. It's not in the bar. It's not in the weight room. Yes, it's on it. You can build deep friendships on the field, playing sports, but if you look at a lot of men and where they've made their best friends, generally it's through situations where there's hardship or trials, where people are forced to be vulnerable with each other. I know I have friends that met in the Army, or the Navy, and it's like they're their best friends. Why? Because they saw death together. They saw bloodshed. They were in the scariest situations. They held each other when they were crying, or that's those friendships are the strongest because they've been through hell together and they've been forced to be vulnerable. But you don't have to go to war to be vulnerable. You can go to war in yourself and make that choice to be vulnerable, and then suddenly forge those friendships and then realize like, oh my God, like this is not only just freeing, but I feel so close to you. And then you have that person for life. And that's how I am with my friends. And we have these deep, deep bonds that I wouldn't trade anything in the world for.
Yeah, everyone loves to. I mean, like when you think of like relationships and friendships, people have their gym friends and then their drinking buddies and this and that. But like a true friend that's going to be there for you, like thick and thin, if they don't know enough about you as a human being and have that connection, then are they really a friend, or are they just there for the good times and not going to be there for the bad times? Right?
And that's the fastest way to tell whether somebody's your friend or not, is have some hardship happen and see who calls you.
Yeah.
You know?
Justin, what are you working on these days besides, obviously being an incredible speaker and an incredible, I hate the word influencer, but inspirer, essentially.
Very kind.
But what are you working on in terms of, films, movies, acting?
Yeah, well, we're here where I'm editing my most recent film. It's called Clouds for Warner Brothers, and it's the true story of a young 17-year-old boy named Zach Sobiak who wrote a song called Clouds. I
remember that kid.
He had osteosarcoma.
Yep.
He had a rare form of bone cancer,
Yeah,
and in the last year of his life, he got a chance to fulfill his dream. And
That was a great song, by the way.
it was a great song, simple but great. I actually made the documentary that you probably saw.
Yes, I have seen it.
7 years ago.
Yep.
So we optioned his mother's book called Fly a Little Higher, and I've been trying to get this movie made for 5 years, and we finally did at a big studio.
Sweet.
I sold a big chunk of my company, Wayfair Entertainment, and we just started a $25 million content fund. So we're starting our own studio, which is really cool. Everything's going to be focused on content that makes us think, makes us want to be better people.
Does that mean like investing in other content creators, or
It's a combination of all of it. We're a studio, so we generate and create intellectual property. We back filmmakers, and really you're looking to find original, amazing voices, stories that haven't been told, all of which that will hopefully help eradicate the world of the various isms, which is a huge goal of ours. Because through content, like so much is possible.
everything's possible?
Attention is the greatest currency in the world. We always say at Wayfair that time is our most valuable asset, and we so appreciate our audience being willing to give us their time. So we put so much effort and energy into the content that we make because it's a time interaction, right? It's the most finite resource on the planet. And we all only have so much of it. So what we do with it really matters. So building that, I'm currently also writing my book, Man Enough, which is going to come out next year. So that and starting to produce the next few movies and trying to somehow at the same time be a father, which is far more important than any of those things, and a husband. So it's that constant work-life balance that I don't believe truly exists in anybody, that I think we're constantly trying to find.
What's your formula for that? Or I guess how do you try to go about that balancing?
Mindfulness.
Yeah.
I think every day is different. In my business, you can't really have a set schedule or a plan, because these projects that you give birth to, there's so many different people that are involved, hundreds and hundreds of people, and so much money, and you're not truly in control of it because it's also a creative entity. So every project needs a different thing, and at any given point in time, you're trying to get 10, 20, 30 projects off the ground at the same time, understanding the rule that maybe if you're lucky, one of them will go. And when one of them goes, you have to give it your time. So my wife and I have a rule. We're not apart for longer than like 10 days.
Yeah.
My kids are 4 and 2 right now. So, even down to editing, like I made sure that I'm editing the movie 15 minutes from home, instead of being in Burbank, which is an hour away, so that I can take my daughter to kindergarten every morning. So every morning I take her, drop her off, we do our thing, I come to work, my wife picks up the kids, she brings them by here, they say hello, so they always have daddy in their life in some way. And you just have to compromise and find little ways to make it work. And I think so long as you're trying and you're making an effort and you're not just mindlessly going about building your business, then I think that you can adjust and readjust and fail and succeed, and you'll have seasons where it works or seasons where it doesn't.
Love it.
Justin, obviously this has been incredibly inspiring. I think, when people hear the story that you just told and what you're working on now and the things that you're talking about, I hope that they can sit down with themselves, especially the men, and really think, but also for women that, have men in their lives, to perhaps bring it up, right? To maybe initiate that conversation with them. And, it is tough, but perhaps they can be the ones that say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. But also for the men to really sit down and think to themselves, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And, what can we work on, right? Because none of us are perfect beings. We'll never be perfect beings.
Never.
But how do we get better every single day? So, thank you. I think for me, it's been incredible to just hear from you.
It's been a blast, man. Thank you.
So we can't wait
Thank
to see
you.
what
I'm
we
sorry if I
continue
talked your ears off, but I guess that's the point of a
That's
podcast.
the point of a podcast.
to do. Absolutely. Thank you,
Thanks,
Justin.
man. All the best with everything.
Thank you guys so much for having me.